Okay, so we are up to Sivchav. We established that that the great Ashkenazic poskim hold that Chodesh and Chutzos is Rabbanon. Became the Abid Rabbanon. Hadover Pashuk which goes to Agdolim. So goes to Rak goes to Amdinas Achokos Me'eretz Yisrael. This is the key point. They only since Chodesh and Chutzos is the Rabbanon. The Gzeira only applies to the countries which are distant from Eretz Yisrael. The Chol mitzvahs Saklus parts, all the mitzvahs that have to do with Eretz Yisrael. Shegozu Rabbanu Chutz La'aretz, when Rabbanu made the decree on Chutz La'aretz, will gozu rak al medinos hakrovas Eretz Yisrael. They only made the decree on countries which are close to Eretz Yisrael, Kmo Trumus and Maisros. Just like Trumus and Maisros only apply to Syria, a place which are very close. Rak Chala, they made universal. Gozu, why? Because the obligation does not come at the time of harvesting, it's divorced from the harvesting. It occurs much later on, at the time when you will need the dough. Furthermore, the Chodosh kilotum Chumas Maisos. Chodosh is much more lenient than Chumas Maisos. The Chala, and the Chala as well. The Tevel Ubemisa, the Avera of having Tevel, non-tithe produce, is death. And people goes to that saying made a decree. But Chodesh Ubalav. Chodesh is only alive, you only get Malchus feeding Chodesh, there's no death. The Raya Brul is that much Amr Kiddushin, and clear cut evidence is that which they said in Kiddushin, Kila Kerem, the Beretzel also by Noah, Kila Kerem, which is more severe. In Eretz Yisrael, that is forbidden to derive benefit from it. Gaza B'chutz La'aretz, and made the decree in Chutz La'aretz said it's forbidden as well. Kila Yisrael, the Beretzel Mutar by Noah, Kila Yisrael, which is without grape seeds, only produce, etc. Right, so mutar no lo goes chutzarts. They didn't make a single chutzarts at all. Ayin sham. In other words, you're not allowed to plant kilis, right? But there's no prohibition on using it. I mean, first the cholesh isur will lab mutar no. Anytime where the prohibition is a negative one, and it's permitted by no lo goes chutzarts. They didn't make a decree in chutzarts. Because the piece of lama goes b'chodesh al medina sakrovos. Why in that case did they make a decree on Chodosh and the countries which are nearby? But the Pashut, the Mekaymas are craving zeloseh. Reason is simple, because places which are near Eretz Yisrael, they bring grain from one place to each other. But as they kill can move on. It comes obviously to negative ramifications. But why should they make a decree on further lands? Yosef said, furthermore, how can they make a decree on countries so far like ours? We will have to wait more than half a year. Mizmana cuts here on time of harvesting, which the tzibur cannot tolerate. The kaim goes in gzeir tzibur davashen cholim lamabo. You can't make a gzeir on the tzibur in something which they can't withstand. So she said, "Mikra perik ema meeting," and we learn this from in Maseches Beitza. Tam zippe bitlu oser shemen ayin sham. For this reason, they rescinded the decree against shemen akum. V'kavachem l'tvu shu chay nevesh mamish. And it certainly should be true about Puris, which is literally chay nevesh, the source of life for a person. So all Jews are clean in that they don't not making chodesh and they're not stumbling in Isser. I would like to add something here, which is that even theoretically, we're chazal to aserit at some point in Chutz La'aretz across the globe. So it's only this if it's only this is the Rabbana, like these poskim say. So Reb Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva about clapping and dancing on Shabbos. He says, even though at one time it might have been usher, but once the Am Yisrael has kind of dropped that standard behavior, and people started clapping and dancing on Shabbos universally, so then the Gzeira also falls off. That which Eretz Yisrael Lamabo or Loni Spashta Barov Yisrael, it hasn't extended into most of Am Yisrael as the benchmark for Gzeira's ongoing effectiveness. That is something which is for all eternity, not just for the time the Gzeira is made. And there was this information because today people are not stringent anymore about not dancing and clapping on Shabbos. The Gzeira fell off, no longer applies. And the same thing will try to apply by Chodesh as well. If Am Yisrael Chutz at some point has decided we're no longer keeping Chodesh, that doesn't work for the Oraisa. And again, it kind of only works implicitly, not explicitly, because if it's an act of rebellion, it's not so clear that it's effective. But if it becomes universal practice not to keep Chodesh, then the Chodesh no longer applies. Just like Shem and Akum, when it became clear that it became universal practice not to keep it became null and void. All Basin has to do at that point is make a formal announcement. They're not allowing or breaking the Gzeira. They're just noting that the Gzeira no longer is applicable. So since that's the case, in Chutz, again, if that doesn't apply to the Raisa, it's not going to have Chodesh Chutz the Raisa. But Chodesh Chutz the Rabbanon, so then the Gzeira can fall off any time in history. Okay? Chafalif. According to these rabbis, have a heter gomer afil b'karka she'Yisrael. It's mutter not just in land which belongs to non-Jews, right? Mutter across the board, as long as you're distant from Eretz Yisrael. The Gedolim, such as the Bach and the Taz, who say that the reason why it's permitted in Chutz is because it doesn't apply to Chodosh or Akum, to produce raised in non-Jewish fields. Custom and Furash, they wrote explicitly the Chodosh shall Yisrael Asuros. They wrote, but if you knew for sure it came from a Jewish field, it'd be forbidden. But yeah, we see many fields of Jews, which are planted by Jews. And they don't conduct themselves to the prohibition of Chodesh. This is very widespread in our countries. And it's true for several generations already. But according to our words, that we hold that's through Rabbanan Chutzlets Ozi Shapir. It works good that, again, in lands distant from Eretz Yisrael, the Gzeira was never applicable. Even to lands of lands of Jews.
Okay.
Ulishitas Arifa Rambam Barosh Luchal Omar Heter Shostos Hakum. Now it's true according to Rif and the Rambam and the Rosh who hold that it's Bidaraisa. Maybe we can still say the Heter of Stos Hakum. One should have received Tesla, which we skipped. But Stos Yisrael Live Shalomar. Then he Lushitasam ain't totally Isur Chodesh B'Makom. It's true that they don't link. They make no contingency between the place where the Korban Omer comes and the place where Chodesh applies. The Chodesh applies Chutzlars, even though the Omer can't come from there. Like we said, the Rama, it's essential to say, it's compelling to say that way. The names of Torah are not linked to each other. Nevertheless, Nira. Came in the Shitasa Mia Tartar Shloyavi Omer Chutzlarts. Nevertheless, it seems that since according to the Shita, the Torah said you can't bring an Omer Chutzlarts Mikra from a pasuk, the Chita Baruch Kamash Kasavnu. Habina Kapan Sheroy Lavi. Has to be he wants to say still. I still have a way of getting around even to the Rambam. Well, it's Chodesh is the Raisa. And it would seem that there's no linkage between where you can bring the Korban Omer from and where Chodesh applies. Still, since the Torah says don't bring it for Chutzlaretz, right? It makes sense to say that should be a place to where you could bring the Omer. A place where you can bring the Omer. The Torah says don't bring it for Chutzlaretz. Right? The Medina should be smart Pesach when Krovin and Ksira. That'd be countries where time Pesach is already close to the harvest. Medina said Tzvon but our northern kingdom, Shezorim, our northern countries. Shezorim Hachar Pesach, where we plant anyway after Pesach. Koitzim Kodim Rosh Hashanah, we harvest for Rosh Hashanah. Ma Mia Totoicha. What is the Torah precluding? There's no planting, no harvesting at time Pesach. So let's say, even according to the Rambam, both Chodesh and Chutzlars the Raisa. And it's not linked to where you can bring the Korban Omer from. Still, the fact that the Torah have to say don't bring it for Chutzlaretz means it's talking about places in Chutzlaretz where the Omer could hypothetically come from.
Right.
Don't bring it from there. So it's mashma that this whole parsha It's not talking about places where you can never bring the Omer from because the planting season is totally different. It has to talk about places where the planting season is somewhat congruent to the planting season, harvesting season, I should say, in Eretz Yisrael, which is an interesting svara. Okay, in other words, we wouldn't. That sort of itself would not be enough to be out here in a Chodesh Doraisa. But once it said the main post go Chodesh Rabbana, we have now limits Chutz saying even the according to those who say Chodesh Doraisa, perhaps it's only in lands where there's a similarity in the pattern of planting and harvesting to Eretz Yisrael.
Okay.
Okay. Chitema. If we're going to say Shatorah Miatosh Lo Yavim Shana Shavra, maybe we see the Torah is really precluding shimping from the last year's harvest in those places. You can't say this. That people of Eretz Yisrael apostle. You're not in Eretz Yisrael can't bring the Omer from last year's harvest. Come here and raise prayer called Kabbanos. The Shvius, the Ev Shalakri Mikram, you can't bring from the harvest of last year. So it's got to be the beginning of your harvest, low self katzircha, not the end of your harvest. Almost should be a carmel, which has because it has to be soft and fresh at the time you're sacrificing. I jump. That which says if they take root before the Omer, they're forbidden until the Omer comes. Omer above, sorry, until the next Omer. In other words, it took root before the Omer, after the previous Omer, before the next Omer. There wasn't until the next Omer. The show Rabbi Lezer Maush Yavi Omer, man, and we're going to ask where about bringing Omer from them. The part it says, "Efshel Mar Chodesh v'Yoshon Ein Tomim Ma'asrim Zel." So we know you can't bring truma, make truma from or meiser from an old crop and a new crop, and vice versa. You're going to say you can bring from the old crop the carbon omer. You can't bring from them. Last year's bros and this year's bros are like two different species for the trumas and and they're going to be like two different species for chodesh as well. Also, it says as beginning of your harvest, not the end of your harvest. Because they're not bikurim, ayin sham. Mara says that's only if they already grew a third before Rosh Hashanah. But if they brought a third, they came to the level of third after Rosh Hashanah, Omer Bamehan Akal Hashanah, then Omer can come from them. But regardless, if they already grew a third before Rosh Hashanah, it's like a separate species. Not all the species of this year. Because says quite truly for the Rosh Hashanah. So in our countries where they're already harvesting Rosh Hashanah. Thank you, Shnei. That's like a different species altogether. They Omer Bamehem, and the Omer cannot come from them. I feel better to Yisrael, even if you bring it to Eretz Yisrael. You can ain't sorach my chutz loretz, mitam chutz loretz. So anyway, you don't have to include chutz loretz just because it's chutz loretz. I mean, I'm thinking Shnei because it's as if it's another species of grain altogether. If I they call mati chutz loretz mevos Omer, so it must be again the pasuk which comes to preclude chutz loretz from bringing the carbon Omer. It's not going on in countries like Russia. It's going to those which are adjacent to and have similar seasons to Eretz Yisrael. And even those are distant to the west and the south and the east, and not on the north, which are not since they're not in terms of not including hetem Omer, below Yisur, not their prohibition. And it makes clear what we said before. That's a nice svara. But you can't build a proper foundation on this svara with two raya gemura without a complete proof. In other words, to say that this chiddush that because the growing seasons are off, so therefore anyway there's no chodesh because there's no havina that the Omer should come from there. That's nice, but it's only a sniff. The sniff of Alma American. It's only a sniff. It's not the primary basis of the answer. The primary basis of the answer has to be based on the fact that it's a drabon. If it's still right, so we also have a sniff, a kind of limud schus, how it should, how we might be able to get out of the problem as well. But that's not the primary reason. Okay. Those who say that beer made of barley of Chodosh is okay. I feel right with from a rush. It's having Chodosh with Chutz the rice, even though Chodosh rice. Down the mashkin ayotzim and a kamoisa. Because the beverages come out of Chodosh are not like Chodosh. Maybe they're rock with Rabbanan, and it is only Isra Rabbanan in such a case. Rabbanan is Shukah B'chutz La'aretz. And once it's Rabbani, can we make a chutzah to show any Israel? We can rely on these people in media. And we have a similar approach by, we used to have a similar approach by Kitnios on Pesach. So once upon a time, the poskim allowed yotzei min Kitnios, like peanut oil on Pesach. Even though couldn't use peanuts because it's a derivative. And what they said, the minhag only applied to the actual thing, not the derivatives. So it's the same thing. So the problem is that there, okay, you can say by saying which is a minhag, like Indians, that the minhag only applies to the actual thing, not the derivative. But here's about the rices. And assuming that Chodesh is the rices, so it's much more difficult to say that it only applies to the actual thing and not to the derivative. Because it's not contingent on what people did, it's contingent on what the Torah means. So as he says, Daiti Lonir Cloud, the body is the Raisa. Says even Yotzim Min Chodesh would be Issa the Raisa, and just Shembo Malkus, Moshi's Barb said there won't be any Malkus on it. Mosh Kosam Rosh Sham, but you must have Deshin Sham. Now, Chacham Tzipel, Pei Tochas, every time the Iker Sud, Chulin, Kuf Chav, Bates, and Sim, the Iker Sud, the Psachim, the Kuf Dal, and Bates, the Zeb Amahu. Because we know that it's not considered to be Zayas, it's not considered to be just perspiration, it's Tam Kicher. And therefore, it's going to be Issa the rice in any event. Well, any is like the Eina Sugar Social Cells that can board with Sham the Varabas Yata the Shmaya. Okay, then he goes on to say we can explain how the Sugar is not a contradiction. One which seems to hold that derivative beverage is Zeba Amon, the other which holds that derivative beverage is Tam Kicker, but that's not important for our purpose. That goes off into a different direction. So that basically concludes our perusal of the Hetzer of Chodesh Bisman Hazeh. And the Chodesh Bisman Hazeh, according to Aruch HaShulchan, is based, and Chutz is based on the premise that Gedoli HaAchronim Ugoli Rishonim of Ashkenaz baskets to Rabbanan. The Rabbanans only apply in this case, like Tumas Samaisis, where they're also Rabbanan, to places Samach to Eretz Yisrael, or places which have a similarity in growing patterns to Eretz Yisrael, and what even might entertain the svara that applies to the Raisa, although it's very difficult to say that. According to the Raisa, it's easier to, if you all Chutz Raisa, like the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam, it's easier to say the leniency, perhaps it doesn't apply to the fields of non-Jews, right? But the fields of Jews will certainly be us in that respect. And finally, what he said is that the fact that you turn it into a beer, another beverage, is not going to be much of a leniency for us. And that is that. You're muted. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Oops. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Some questions. One, how do Sfardim relate to this in Chutz La'aretz? Sfardim in Chutz La'aretz?
Sfardim have a problem.
You know, it's according to the Rambam, and it's basically it's Asr D'Oraita, and so they just got to deal with it.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm sure. Listen, like most other things, Sfardim of the Chutz La'aretz have become he's stuck in the zoo to a certain respect. So it's like Sfardim Chutz La'aretz rely on Erevin, even though theoretically they shouldn't support, shouldn't. So too probably many of them rely on the term which the Ashkenaz rely on, not necessarily because they should.
What if we go back 100 years to looking at like Morocco and North Africa?
Well, those lands are close to Eretz Yisrael, so they probably were kind of more universal because the growing seasons were similar to Eretz Yisrael, so they probably were much more machmir and chodesh than they are now.
Okay, and what is like the point of view of say like the major hashgachas in the states, the OU, the okay?
Nobody's machmir and chodesh.
Okay.
There are those hashgachas which will mark something as yashin if it's yashin, but it's not because they're stringent on as a general policy.
Okay, because somebody that was, a number of years ago, I was working with somebody, a Haredi type, and he had to make a trip to Chutz La'aretz, and he started asking me about Chodesh, and it's like, I don't know what to tell him. It's like
now, usually the people who keep Chodesh Chutz La'aretz, and there are more and more as time goes by, they work off lists. There are people who are diligent in pursuing and compiling lists, which I'm not sure nowadays are primarily available online.
Hmm. All right. So, but in general, it's the major hashgachas pretty much follow the Aruch HaShulchan here, and don't worry much about Chodosh.
Correct.
What does the Rabbanut do about importing stuff that might be Chodosh
I
into
don't
Israel?
think they do. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they are makbid on not importing stuff which might be chodesh.
Okay.
I don't know. I should say, you should ask somebody who knows more. I rescind that thought because I'm not even sure that that's correct.
Okay.
Actually, knowing the
Because
Rabbanut, for all we know, they couldn't care less.
the Rabbanut often rely on
They rely on
external
leniencies very often.
and on external hashgachas,
Yes, exactly.
some of which are not so good. But
Yeah.
okay, all right, Shkoch, that was interesting.
Okay. Next topic, as per your list or choice. Let me know.
But I'll have to think about something.
Okay, but not next Sunday, because I still have Yontif.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay.
So after that,
Yes. Okay, Moadim L'Simcha.
Chagim is Sasan. Loved everybody there.
Take care. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.